Courthouse, the special ceremony being held in Franklin County. And fighting back against an invasive species, how agencies are trying to rid our lakes and rivers of Asian carp.
We've got you covered.
Method that could help decrease the Asian carp population.
This morning, crews demonstrated the method that has already been tested in neighboring states like Missouri and Illinois. As News 3's Danny Valle shows us, high-profile guests attended today's test.
The U.S. Senate Majority Leader and a former astronaut attending a demonstration at Kentucky Lake Monday. The goal? To improve the harvest of the invasive Asian carp.
I guess nobody's got any idea how many are in there, how long it's going to take to get them out.
Senator Mitch McConnell helped secure $25 million in federal funds last year to fight Asian carp. Those fish, the senator says, pose a threat to Kentucky's $1.3 billion fishing industry.
$1.3 billion fishing industry just in the state of Kentucky. I don't know if he was talking about just the Tennessee River pertaining to the Kentucky Lake, or if he's talking about the whole state. Let's listen to it one more time. Back it up. Right there.
Senator Mitch McConnell helped secure $25 million in federal funds last year to fight Asian carp. Those fish, the senator says, pose a threat to Kentucky's $1.3 billion fishing industry.
$1.3 billion fishing industry. I'm pretty sure that's covering the whole state. Billion. That can't just be in one particular area coming off the Tennessee River in western Kentucky. But let's listen to what he's got to say.
Play my role and to help us solve these problems as they come along.
Workers began experimenting with the modified unified method 2 weeks ago. They use sound and electricity to corral the fish into one area using nets, a process considered unharmful to the fish. A pump is then used to transport fish to a net where they're collected. In the last couple of weeks, officials have harvested around 17,000 pounds of Asian carp.
The game fishing has been falling off, so the Fish and Wildlife Resources folks here recognize that as a problem.
U.S. Geological Survey Director Dr. Jim Riley says the method has been used by Chinese fishermen for decades. He says the carp are prolific breeders that can live 25 to 30 years.
They basically just destroy the ecosystem that the native fish require to breed.
Governor Andy Beshear says Monday marked the first test of the modified unified method done on a U.S. reservoir larger than 500 acres. The Kentucky Fish Center has been leading efforts to eradicate Asian carp and looks to improve harvest numbers next year.
In 2019, the center facilitated the harvest of more than 6 million pounds of Asian carp, and its 2020 goal is even more, at least 8 million pounds.
Reporting at Kentucky Lake, Danny Valle, News 3.
Wildlife crews will continue testing the modified unified method until Thursday. Overcast skies, but warmer temperatures today. Jim, any chance these warm temperatures will stick around very long?
Through the evening, that's about it. Another cold front is headed this way. Ahead of that cold front, we will likely see a few light rain showers. There's not a lot of activity showing up on the local view storm track radar right now. You can see running through Jefferson County, Hamilton.
Like how transparent the city has been about the Aquatic Center project.
Jennifer, and tonight at 10 we'll continue our reports with much more. What emails show about the changing scope and costs of the project. We'll explore how the swim team's grassroots efforts for a competition pool evolved into this current project.
Okay, Shamaria, thank you. Now, if you want to read past stories we've covered on the Indoor Recreation and Aquatic Center, go to our homepage, WPSDLocal6.com, and click Aquatic Center.
Now, your Weather Authority first forecast.
Absolutely amazing weather out there today. Lots of sunshine.
Thousands of
The heavy rains and the soil here is just, I guess the last couple of years has had more than it could hold.
Now, the good news is officials say the water is starting to recede. It should take 1 to 2 weeks before it is below flood stage. Back here on Glendale Road, no homes are being evacuated. Officials tell us there is no concern for safety at this point.
The second home that swept into the river by Sunday afternoon, no one was hurt.
Heartland News is...
This is the PBS NewsHour. from WETA Studios in Washington, and in the West from the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism at Arizona State University.
And now back to our top story. More questions today about the fate of Americans aboard 2 cruise ships caught up in the global coronavirus crisis. Amna Nawaz has the latest.
This is not how Cheryl and Paul Molesky envisioned their cruise vacation.
We have been in this room on the Diamond Princess for the last 27 days. For the last 12 days, we have not stepped foot out of this door into the hallway.
The Syracuse, New York couple were part of the 300 plus Americans quarantined on the ship in Yokohama, Japan. The vessel, with 3,700 passengers and crew, has been docked in Japan for 12 days. More than 450 people have tested positive for the coronavirus, making it the largest cluster of cases outside of China. But late Sunday, U.S. officials evacuated 340 Americans who'd been released from the ship, including the Moleskys, and flew them back to the United States.
It's a little bit scary with the numbers going up of people taken off the ship with the COVID-19 virus. So, I think it's time to go. I think it's time to cut our losses and take off.
The 2 flights of evacuees landed early today at military bases in Northern California and Texas. They now face another 14 days in quarantine.
Passengers.
Meanwhile, the World Health Organization said it's working closely with Japanese officials to prevent a larger outbreak.
We need to make sure that we focus on our objective, public health objective, which is to contain the virus and not to contain the people, and making sure that we can have a right balance between the health of the population in Japan and other countries, but also the health of the people being currently on this boat.
Late last week, the Westerdam cruise ship was finally allowed to dock in Cambodia after 5 countries had turned it away. One passenger, an American, then traveled to Malaysia, where she tested positive for the virus days later. Hundreds of people released from the ship have already headed to their home countries, and they're being warned to quarantine themselves. In China, health experts say the outbreak may be stabilizing. Some workers returned to their jobs in Beijing and Shanghai today as the city's 2-week quarantines expired.
The elevator is being disinfected every 2 hours, and you need to take your body temperature and record it before entering the building, and then take it another time before entering the office. So I don't think fear is necessary.
The Chinese government said today that more than 10,000 patients who have been hospitalized with the virus have recovered and been discharged.
All over the country except Wuhan, the number of newly diagnosed cases has been declining for 13 consecutive days. These are really good signals illustrating that our prevention and control efforts have worked very well.
WHO scientists are now in China working with officials there to research the spread of the virus. The Centers for Disease Control said the decision to repatriate Americans from the ship in Japan came after an increase in the number of new coronavirus cases on board. So how well does quarantine work? And what are the risks after those who've been isolated return into the wider population? For that and more, I'm joined by Dr. William Schaffner. He's professor of infectious diseases at Vanderbilt University's School of Medicine. Dr. Schaffner, thanks for being with us and welcome to the NewsHour. I want to ask you about how health officials are handling these cases. When you look at that first cruise ship case, you've got hundreds of people that decide to evacuate, fly back to the United States, even after some of them did test positive for the virus. Are they handling this the right way?
Oh, I think our officials are handling the circumstances very, very well. They have well-prepared places where these folks in quarantine are going to go. They're providing excellent clinical care for the people who have been shown to be diagnosed with the virus. And I think we're still very much in the containment phase here in the United States. Let's find everybody, diagnose them quickly, and then public health can work on all the contacts. So I think our officials have this one under control.
Okay, what about the rest of the world now? We also just told the story about that second cruise ship. It was allowed to dock in Cambodia. You've got hundreds of passengers who disembarked and have already made their way onto other places. That one known case of a positive coronavirus test we know about. What are your concerns when it comes to that?
Yeah, well, there I'm a little bit more concerned because there's turmoil and there was not a consistent policy. People who've been exposed now have traveled to many parts of the world. I hope they're being identified, and I hope local public health officials are contacting them and keeping them under surveillance. I'm not sure that's happening, and we have now the possibility of little individual outbreaks starting in other countries, because if those people are infected, they could start chains of transmission in other countries. That would not be a good thing.
So tell me a little bit about what we do know about standards of quarantine. We've been hearing a lot from passengers here who have had to go through that 14-day quarantine, some very emotional tales that they're telling too. One woman saying, you know, I feel like I've lost a month of my life after 14 days of quarantine in Japan, 14 days more back in the United States. What is that quarantine like? And do you know if other countries are standardizing it in any way?
I don't think there's any standardization, but certainly I feel for, and my hat is off to all the people who've been quarantined. It must be very, very boring. The rest of your life is moving on, and you can but deal with it through your iPhone, and it must be very, very difficult. Also, you're in isolation or semi-isolation, so there's not a whole lot of interaction with other individuals. It's not a very pleasant experience. You're being imprisoned by a virus.
I have to ask you, Dr. Schaffner, there's a lot we don't yet know about the virus, but there's a number of theories that are being circulated and shared, and I'd like to get your take on them for the sake of making sure we're getting the right information out to our audience. There's some skepticism, it's fair to say, around information coming from the Chinese government where the virus is believed to have originated in China. And there was this moment from Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton, who gave an interview just yesterday on Fox News, and he was asked about the origins of the virus. Take a listen to this.
We don't know where it originated, but we do know that we have to get to the bottom of that. We also know that just a few miles away from that food market is China's only biosafety level 4 super laboratory that researches human infectious diseases. Now, we don't have evidence that this disease originated there, but because of China's duplicity and dishonesty from the beginning, we need to at least ask the question.
Dr. Schaffner, what's your response to that?
Well, it's a question that needs to be addressed, but I must say there are no scientists or public health officials around the world who think that this is a somehow escaped virus from a containment facility. This is a virus just as the SARS virus was and the MERS virus, the Middle East Respiratory Syndrome viruses. These were coronavirus that came to humans from animals. That's what happened with this case.
To Senator Cotton's point, we've heard this before, though, there is skepticism around the information coming from the Chinese government. Do you trust the numbers as reliable coming from the government?
Well, the numbers of cases coming from China have changed over time because their case definition has changed. I think they're trying to do a good job, but it still is very confusing and we have to be skeptical. We don't know whether the outbreak in Wuhan and other parts of China is continuing at the same rate, increasing, or, my goodness, it might be decreasing. The numbers are not consistent enough for us to draw firm conclusions yet.
Well, to that point, we just heard today that the Chinese government is saying there was actually a dip in the number of cases. If that is true, what would that tell you about the potential future spread of the virus?
Well, if that's true, and I certainly hope it is, it would mean that this ginormous public health experiment that they have done, quarantining from 11 to 50 millions of people, actually did have some impact in reducing the transmission of the virus. I've always hoped that. I hope that's correct, and we can begin then to plan the end game. When can we start turning things back to normal? But it's too early to be confident that we can do that. We can hope for the best, but we have to keep preparing for the worst.
Dr. Schaffner, just a few seconds left. I have to ask you, as recently as a week ago, scientists were saying there is still the potential of a global pandemic. Based on what we know in the last week, do you believe that's still the case?
The potential is there, Amna. Whether we'll get there or not, we don't know. I'm holding my breath and crossing my fingers.
Dr. William Schaffner of Vanderbilt University School of Medicine. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. But to think that it could have been released from a containment center over in China is just mind-blowing, to the degree that, okay, if it was released from a containment center, was it done intentionally or not intentionally? And the next question leads to this. Was the government in behind, hypothetically speaking, if it was released from a containment center, was the government of China using this, weaponizing this towards chemical biological warfare against their own people to try to slow down or stop the open protesting that has been going on over there for the past 6 or 7 or 8 months? There's a lot of ifs. There's a lot of hypotheticals. There's a lot of unanswered questions that even to this day we still don't know. But once more, I'm like the good doctor. We hope for the best, but at the same time, we expect the worst. In other words, we pray to God that it will not be unleashed as a world global pandemic. Because if it does, it would be catastrophic in ways that are unimaginable to the human mind. Unimaginable.
Thank you.
Manuscript about what President Trump said to me. I hope they become public someday. He tweets, but I can't talk it.
David Dean's children are playing in the mud, seemingly oblivious to the encroaching danger, or just used to it. They've called.
Were provided to both Republicans and Democrats on the Senate Intel Committee. Intel Committee Chair Richard Burr knew of Warner's back-channel efforts, but chose not to investigate further. I wonder why. Contrast Warner's connection with Russia to that of former Attorney General Jeff Sessions, who recused himself from any Russian investigations.
And for Nevada voters, and what I can tell you is what I have seen on the ground here in my
frustration with the White House over this review of his book, and the fact that he's being silenced while the president can talk about things that he was involved in the White House. And then, like you said, there was a lot of innuendo. He said called Ukraine the sprinkles on the Sunday of his book, that it's teasing that other things in there are far more explosive. And then, if you want to wade into some policy, he said it was critical on everything from Iran to North Korea. He said those are failed policies by President Trump. He said his Venezuela policy has failed. He said he's not tough enough on Russia. And in fact, in the context of talking about Russia, specifically the president's meeting in Helsinki with President Putin, he says he said I was willing to put up with a lot, which suggested that he was willing to tolerate. He was not happy with the way that meeting went, and he was willing to tolerate things like that as long as he thought he was making headway on other things. But the big headlines are that this battle between the White House and John Bolton over his book continues. I spoke with an aide to him earlier today who said that they are now aren't sure if his book will come out on its scheduled publication date of March 17th. That looks increasingly likely. And he's really gearing up for a fight. He said he can't speak freely until he's under a threat of legal action from the executive branch, and that everything's caught up in this review.
Did he confirm, not that we need a confirmation, but...
In other words, they're trying to sequester what he has to say, because what he has to say could possibly be crucial involving the impeachment scandal that went on, that the Senate didn't want this man to testify or be a witness thereof. The whole thing is unraveling as a fiasco, something that they tried to cover up or tried to make it look appealing towards it looking like that it was authentic in the eyes of the general public, and it was nothing more than a failed attempt to cover up the truth. Now, what that truth is to this day, I still do not know, and the vast majority of the Americans don't know neither. We just know that according to the Republican Party, what Donald Trump done was inappropriate, it was wrong, but it wasn't wrong to the degree of having him impeached. That's what we know by the Republican Party. It was wrong, but we're willing to excuse it. We're willing to pardon it. Wow. That says a lot about the security of the United States towards our allies, towards our partners in the future now, doesn't it? Wow. That is a big question mark towards, if it happened once, could it happen again to some of our allies, to some of our partners, to some of those who want to fight with us for free, open, fair democracy? Wow would be my word, or even whoa.
But did he confirm that the president made a dirty deal with Zelensky? I want the dirt on Biden or you don't get your arms. Did he confirm that?
He did it. He wouldn't go into those sorts of details. Like, he was more kind of teasing about it, and also saying he was teasing, it's all in his book and stay tuned, and at the same time saying he wanted to say more but he couldn't because he's under this sort of, to back of a better phrase, gag order, while his book is under this national security review. And the White House has said that there's classified information in there that can't be published, and that's what the holdup is. He disputes that and says there's not. In fact, he repeats again tonight what his lawyer had said, which is that...
I don't think it would be so much right now as much of a national interest, a breach of national interest, as it would be, why would you want to tell the ending story of the movie or the book to the viewers that's going to jeopardize the sale of what you're even putting on paper to begin with? In other words, it would be a conflict of interest for him to tell all the details about what's in his book, because then you would be basically giving the store away. And if you're going to give the store away, you just will take the copyrights and all the work that it took to manufacture the book to begin with, and chunk it out the door. Because now everybody knows what the punchline is going to be. They know the ending of the story. And if you know the punchline to the story, why you want to go out here and buy a $12, $18, $22, $24 book if you already know the punchline? There has to be a way, and I don't know what that way would be, whenever it comes to these music writers and these movie producers and these book authors. There has to be a way that they can produce this stuff and put it out to the general public. That way it won't violate some sort of piracy, private rights, to the degree that people can now, let's say you had a $22 book, and all of a sudden you grab it up today because it becomes public today. Well, tomorrow, somebody may have retranslated that whole book in less than a day and put it back out on the market for half the price in a complete different language. So there has to be some sort of way to control the better interest of the people, whoever is manufacturing a movie or a book or a song. There has to be some sort of way of being able to control this more so than what what has occurred today, because so many people now will go to a movie theater and they'll basically film a brand new movie coming out, and the next thing you know, on the black market, you can get it for half that price. Has to be a way. I don't know what that way would be, but it has to be a way to conforming it to where it's more private than to jeopardize privacy rights.
He didn't even think he had to submit this book for review, but he did so out of an abundance of caution. So he didn't go into, and he said he wouldn't go into details about Ukraine and what he thought about all of that, but, teased and said, tune into chapter 14 and things like that.
How much did people pay to hear this nothing?
Well, tickets were free, but they were first come, first served basis, and there was about 1,200 people there who packed into the auditorium. And, a number of them submitted questions. In fact, the question they got most was, did you think the president's call with Zelensky was perfect? That was great. It must be amazing to pay good money to go to the Gypsy Rose Glee of national security. Anyway, thank you, Carol Lee, for that reporting tonight. I love the on-the-spot aspect of your work tonight. Meanwhile, Attorney General Bill Barr is taking heat from a bipartisan group of former DOJ officials, 2,000 of them, after intervening in that criminal case of Roger Stone last week. By the way, that sentencing's coming up. And a stunning move, over 2,000 alumni, if you will, of the U.S. Justice Department have issued a joint statement condemning Barr for allowing politics to influence the justice system there. They write, it is unheard of for the department's top leaders to overrule line prosecutors in order to give preferential treatment to a close associate of the president. Accusing him of, quote, doing the president's personal bidding, they say those actions require Mr. Barr to resign. Notably, the signatories in this statement include Barr's old boss, the former deputy attorney general in the George Herbert Walker Bush administration, Donald Iyer. Writing in The Atlantic, by the way, Iyer says that Barr's actions are so extreme that, quote, it is not too strong to say that Bill Barr is un-American. Well, that's pretty strong. Joyce, thank you much. Let's go to everybody. Joyce Vance, starting with you. What do you make of all these top officials and all kinds of officials, bipartisan group, public servants, professional prosecutors, if you will, and investigators? What do you make of all them coming out like this, putting their names on something that's documented? Oh, you're on there, Joyce. I just learned that.
It's unusual for this many prosecutors to speak with one voice, Chris. Obviously, this is a topic that one would expect heated debate on. The letter, I understand, was the product of a lot of negotiation. But at the end of the day, 2,000, and that number continues to grow as more people sign the letter, have voiced their concern about this Attorney General's continued service.
Who is at the head of this, and what was the straw that broke the camel's back, if you will? What group was behind getting the signatures together?
I think that there were a number of different groups of people inside of DOJ, alums, as you say, former assistant U.S. attorneys, former U.S. attorneys. If you look at the signatories on this letter, there are former FBI agents. There are people who worked as career lawyers in the department for several decades. So it really spans Republicans and Democrats spread across the country geographically. And what it highlights is the concern that DOJ is an institution that is effective because people trust it. People believe that there is integrity in the decision-making process at DOJ. That's what Bill Barr has destroyed by overriding a decision made by career prosecutors. Their U.S. attorney signed off on their initial submission, and now all of a sudden one of the president's close friends gets special treatment that no other defendant in a criminal case has received.
You know, Shannon, what got to me, the first inkling I had that this guy was not going to be a good AG, he was going to be the president's Roy Cohn, is the way he presented the Mueller report. The Mueller report had problems of its own. And Mueller had problems with all. He's getting older. But, you know, the showcase of the way he did, like it didn't accomplish anything. He basically, you know, whatever the right word is, he took all the power away from it.
Well, I mean, may highlight the real difficulty of being Trump's attorney general. And I remember shortly before the Mueller report came out, talking to people who had worked with Bill Barr throughout his career, who were really confident that he would be an independent,
Attorney General, an honest broker.
He had been.
Because he had such a career, such a reputation that he had spent his life, that he had worked tirelessly to build up. And they argued, well, he's not going to throw that away for Trump because he has no allegiances to Trump. And then, as you pointed out, that quickly started to change after the Mueller report, where we started to see, well, maybe he was there to help out Trump. And now, of course, we see what's happening now. But I'll tell you, Trump's not exactly happy with Barr now either. He's very angry about the McCabe decision and not prosecuting McCabe that came out on Friday. So here you have Barr being attacked by his peers, his colleagues, the people he tried to build this reputation up with over his entire professional life. And yet still the president is dissatisfied with him and they have a tense relationship right now.
Well, the former Justice Department officials who wrote this letter calling for Barr's resignation have also a message for current DOJ employees. They're encouraging them to report abuses, refuse to carry out political directives, and where necessary, withdraw or resign from cases involving such misconduct. Joyce, what do you make of that? This is sort of something, I think the basic request is that they go to the Inspector General.
I want to weigh in real quick on all this information that we have been bombarded with just within the past few months that has turned into public domain. You know, it used to be that certain information had to go through channels. And in this information going through channels, people would make money off of the channels as it was circulating into public domain. Now, since we've gotten all this data, computerized digital software pertaining to all this media that we have, it has done away with a lot of those channels towards people being able to make money in the middle. And I feel like that this is one reason that has upset the apple cart pertaining to my particular story, is because I have been willing to put my story out to the general public as far as open domain and not even charging so much as making any money off of various commercials. In other words, I have been upfront and open with the ministry towards what the ministry has went through. Which I guess sounds odd or unusual. But at the same time, if you're going to publish a book or make a movie, you have to have a certain amount of clientele pertaining to the interest of the general public before anybody is ever going to be willing to spend any time or money or sponsor you in the degree of wanting to take your material to another level. I myself have done everything freely because that's the way the Bible talks about it. It says, freely ye have received, freely ye shall give. I have went directly to the letterhead of what the Bible says. Freely ye have received, freely give. In other words, it didn't cost me nothing for my salvation pertaining to the salvation plan of Christ. It didn't cost me a thing. It was free whenever I accepted it into my life. And I don't feel like that it would be fair for me to charge others for something that was freely given to me. Now, all this other stuff pertaining to my life story, that's kind of a bonus. That's kind of an add-on. But once more, would the general public have ever known about the issues surrounding the windmill, the founder of the Windmill Ministries, if I didn't put that information out to the general public as far as it being open domain? Probably not. And I knew that the cards were stacked against me because I have went to various people and asked them if they would be willing to support or sponsor or be a part of a ghostwriter or a publishing agency in getting my story out to the general public. And 99.9% of the time, I get a 0 goose eggs answer. So, obviously, this spirit of rebelliousness is still going on within the boundaries of my own personal life, to the point that if I did not put it out there freely, pertaining to it being open domain, odds are people never would have heard about this story. Once more, the story is not about the storyteller. The story is not about the person that is putting out the story, which is in fact the storyteller. The story is about God, and about how that God was with the storyteller, and how that God delivered the storyteller again and again and again and again out of ever close encounter, regardless whether it was economically, politically, legally, emotionally, psychologically, that God protected the storyteller in allowing for the storyteller to be telling the story even right now, even as I sit and talk to my viewers. One day, I hope the seeds that I have planted, beginning all the way back to 1983 and 88, one day I hope to see the maturity of these seeds that I have planted, and I hope that there will be a movement of people that will understand that one hand helps wash the other in their gratitude, that if I was willing to help them in freely giving them a story, maybe they would be willing to freely help me in some of the endeavors of the ministry, for it to grow and to become that and evolve and to become that in which what God the Father had called the ministry to begin with, that people should have taken hold of 30 plus years ago. But because of their rebellion, or because of them being hoodwinked, or because of them thinking that I was way out of league, or because that maybe they thought that they was invincible and that they wasn't going to die, pertaining to the ideology of the rapture theory of people just going to vanish or disappear. There's only going to be very, very few people that's going to be worthy enough whenever God surrounds the earth and comes in flames of fire. There's only going to be very, very, very few people that's going to be worthy to be transfigurated from mortal to immortal in the twinkling of an eye. Other than that, it says in the Bible that there will be a massive bloodshed upon the world whenever the opening of the second seal occurs, to the point that there will be massive carcasses all over the planet, where the unbelievers thinks that they're doing God a favor by taking out this group of people towards dead carcasses being everywhere. And that's whenever the dead in Christ shall rise. That's whenever Gabriel shall blow the trumpet. That's whenever the graves will burst. That's whenever God the Father will come back, which will be the second coming of Christ towards the great resurrection. And that's whenever God will throw the planet off into deep, dark tribulation that will go beyond anything comprehensible that mankind has ever even began to imagine or think about. These are the proper channels that I'm taking right now, which kind of in a way seem to be improper, because I'm not getting the bang for the buck right now pertaining to financially speaking. But eventually, I have faith and hope that it will. It may be 2 years, maybe 5 years, maybe 10 years, maybe 2 days. I don't know. But as of right now, I do not have the right influences, the right sponsors, the right people backing the ministry of making it worldwide known all over the planet. And I guess the reason why is because I'm covering so much corruption beginning all the way back into the Reagan era, and there's so many people still living that it's going to be so offensive to so many people, they want to sequester this information. But it just so happens because of the technological advances that has happened in the 21st century pertaining to social media, there's really nothing that they can really do about it other than let me talk and let me present my testimony before the people. And they hope that they have been persuasive enough by convincing others that the individual that's talking to you right now is basically loco, psychologically, emotionally, chemically imbalanced, to the point that I won't have nobody that want to pay any attention to me, that I won't have any supporters, that I won't have a Joe Osteen congregation of 40,000 plus. I guess that's what they're hoping, because in actuality, they're hoping. This is it in a nutshell. They're hoping that the assignment of all the discoveries that I've been a part of, going all the way back to 1983, whenever the two hands miraculously come out of heaven and saved my life after a 1979 Buick Regal almost cut me completely in half after losing 9 units of blood, they're hoping that the analogy that I've been preaching for 30 plus years is either inaccurate or nothing more than a bald-faced lie, which tells me that this same group of people is still praying to God that the judgment of God is not coming up onto the planet. And I got news for all these people that thought that they could whip God. First of all, you're not going to whip God. Second of all, the things that I've been doing, preaching and teaching, is in fact authentic, to the point that now it's just going to be a matter of time before it will rise up out of the ashes. Don't know where, don't know when, don't know how, don't know who's going to be in behind it, don't know who the sponsors are going to be, but it's just a matter of time before now the whole head of the Windmill Ministries will take center stage before the great awakening of a revival that was well needed and well appreciated going all the way back 30 plus years ago. But they thought that they could hoodoo the messenger because they did not like the message. I'm going to repeat that one more time. They thought that they could hoodoo the messenger, which is me speaking to you right now, because they did not like the message. Well, tough titty and the milk's still good is what I was always told growing up as a teenager. And the fact of the matter is, I don't like to go out and mow my yard whenever it's 105 degrees outside. But that don't mean I'm going to go out here and rent a tractor and a breaking plow and plow it all under where I ain't got to worry about mowing it the rest of the year because I don't want to get out in the heat and mow it. There's certain things that people over here in America need to learn that they cannot stop or reverse, especially whenever it's something superseding us all. Just like I have said before, and I'll say again, over in Acts 23:9, for if this be of God, you cannot overthrow this. And this is of God. And the reason why that I know this is because if it was not of God, God would have done already allowed for me to have been taken out a long time ago. And they know it. And that's what frightens them. And that's what scares them around here. That is correct. That's the gospel. The failure falls upon the fault of the community that didn't support the ministry. The failure don't fall upon to the feet of the founder of the ministry, because the founder of the ministry has done everything imaginable towards going out here on his own and doing things, maybe in an unorthodox way, but he's still moving just like the little turtle. He's still steadily after it. He's still heading towards his goal. Regardless whether WENK up here in Union City likes it or not, regardless whether the officials in Weakley County or Old Bryan County or the surrounding counties like it or not, regardless whether the church communities want to get in behind the windmill ministries or not, the little turtle is still heading towards his goal. He may be moving slowly, but he's still heading in the right direction. And it's the same direction that he was heading towards going all the way back into 1983, whenever he first made a telephone call to the White House and said, I will be the one to meet the Antichrist, and before the poison arrow strike the flesh of my skin, that I will vanish from this planet or totally disappear from the existence of humanity. In which later on throughout the years, if you know anything about my story, I identified that I was not necessarily going to disappear. There will be a few people that will. That will be transliterated. But to go to war with the devil pertaining to the doomsday devil's duel, odds are my body will lay in the streets of Jerusalem for 3.5 days while the whole world devours and watches the event unfold. We are now living in the day pertaining to the 21st century as far as all this supersonic digital age, to where these things now can unfold the way that biblical Bible prophecy intended for them to unfold. If I would have come onto the scene 20 years ago, 100 years ago, 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, towards preaching this same message, I would have been preaching it in vain, because it would have been virtually impossible for the whole world to have seen the two witnesses go to battle with each other in the doomsday devil's duel. But today, in the 21st century, pertaining to all the high-tech, digitalized computer systems that we have, we're in that era now that this can very well take place just within a matter of minutes, if not seconds, to the point that the whole world would be able to visually watch this unfold. So yes, we are living in the right era for biblical Bible prophecy to fulfill itself. That's the reason why I stand on the rock, and the rock being Christ, that I am not delusional, I am not delirious, I am not demented, I do not have some sort of mental illness pertaining to me being basically crazy. I'm just going to use that terminology. I'm going to continue to stand fast on what that I know and what that I believe, and we're going to wait this out and see in this Mexican standoff who's going to be willing to give in versus the other. Because I guarantee you, even though my health may be deteriorating towards my weight and me having diabetes too, if God intends for me to fulfill this, If God intends for me to see this through, I don't care how many jinxes that they may try to place upon to my life pertaining to slowing this ministry down. It will still be done. Thank you for listening. Good luck to all of us. As I've said before, and I'll say again, shalom, especially to those who are looking, waiting, and watching for Christ to coming out of the Middle East, coming out of the eastern skies and busting the skies open towards resurrecting his children in the second coming. Thank you. And shalom.